We have the seat projections up on the screen now. We've got yours as well as some of the other ones that have been released over the last week. They all have obviously conservative lead majority.
They're all, well, by conservative lead, they're all between 351 and about 359 seats, depending on the election, right? Just to describe it for those folks just listening to this.
Yeah. Labor's in the low 200s for the most part, and then Lib Dem aren't going to really improve very much on their last performance as of now. So, with your model, we noticed that you do have the highest number of conservative seats, lowest number of labor seats among the seat projections released over the last week. What do you attribute that to?
So that's almost completely demographics. That is, again, this is the thing. Other models are, when you use uniform swing, right? A lot of people in the UK, they love to judge elections by uniform swing. They're like, oh, if the Conservatives are up 8 points somewhere, then they're going to be up 8 points everywhere, essentially. But our model says, okay, they might be up 8 points, but if an area voted leave, then they're probably gaining more there. But if it voted remain, they're gaining less in that area, right? And by doing this, the model is able to find a lot of seats in the north, specifically a lot of seats that voted for leave but typically vote labor, and our model is saying no, those seats are actually a lot closer than you would get off just uniform swing. And again, the north, if you look at it, is that's probably one of the most volatile polling regions we've actually seen so far in this election. Usually it's a labor lead. Again, the north in the UK looks actually very similar to the US Midwest, very similar to, say, a Pennsylvania, an Ohio, or a Michigan, per se. It's actually very similar to that. And this election is going to be kind of a realignment election where these people in the north, they usually voted Labour, but they voted for Brexit. And Boris Johnson, again, one of the reasons why, when you go back to that other graph, when you see the sharp decline in the Brexit Party vote and the increase in the Conservative vote, is because he's basically become the Brexit Party. I mean, his entire campaign slogan is "Get Brexit Done." That's their entire slogan. And those voters in the north, again, usually Labour is supposed to win the north by 7 or so points. Right now, it's basically tied. It's basically like a 2-3 point race, sometimes even tied, right? And from our model, we're able to find a lot of seats that are kind of worse for Labour, that are very leavy, and our model says they're gone. Whereas other ones, if you look at it and you use that same kind of swing, you still favor Labour in those seats, right? And that's really going to be those deciding seats in this election, is where are those kind of Labour Levy seats going to go?
Yeah, Robert.
So I'll just give it.
Paco,
real quick, Robert, just a follow-up question. So you said at the top that it was really the demographic characteristics that were driving the difference of your model, and then in addition to that, looking at how the constituencies voted on Leave Remain. What kind of demographic information are you considering kind of beyond some of the political variables that you had mentioned there? Just because I know we have a pretty nerdy audience who might be interested in learning a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so again, our model is extremely limited by what is actually polled. But that being said, Leave Remain is kind of a perfect all-in-one variable for a lot of your demographics. When you look at the Leave vote, the Leave Remain vote itself from the 2016 referendum, it broke very cleanly among educational lines. More educated areas voted to remain, less educated areas voted to leave. It voted among age, among diversity. Younger people voted to remain, older people voted to leave. And then also in more ethnically diverse places, typically if a place had more immigrations, had more minorities, those places voted to remain. The more immigration was in an area, those places typically voted to remain. The places with less immigration, the places that were more white, they voted to leave, right? And I think if you're listening to this right now, I think you're hearing a lot of parallels to 2016 U.S. presidential election, and that is very intentional in all those cases. That same kind of shift, that surprise upset we saw with the Brexit, that was very similar to kind of the Trump upset we saw in the Midwest in 2016. So basically, our model is just saying we're going to see that again.
I was going to say, as Podco knows, I like to draw parallels between the current U.S. environment and others. Yeah, so I also see a lot of parallels, the educational lines, the rural-urban divide. It's interesting that it's happened at pretty much the same time, right? 2016.
Yeah.
So I have like a sort of like good American parallel for this. The Texas 7th is the Houston district the Democrats picked up last time. I think it was George H.W. Bush's seat from memory. Those kinds of sort of urban suburban seats with a lot of like well-educated, well-off professionals, those are the kind of seats that Labor are actually going to win. Like our model has Labor picking up a London seat, Putney, like very confidently, despite the fact that we have them doing like very badly overall. We have them picking up that seat, which other people don't have. We see Labor doing what the Democrats have done and picking up some of these sort of urban suburban seats. But we also have Labor being just smashed in northern seats. Blair's old constituency of Sedgefield, that's currently going blue, according to us. That's about a 2/3 chance that Tony Blair's old seat, sort of conventional northern Labor heartland seat, it's going to go to the Conservatives because it voted for Brexit by 60%. Like, that's the kind of thing you're seeing. You are seeing the same sort of urban suburban seats going to the left of center party, and you're seeing the sort of white working class areas going for the right of center party, and you're seeing the same sort of alignments that you saw in 2016, 2018, as you're seeing in UK in 2019.
So we just got a viewer question along these lines. Wants to know how much weight would we give to constituency polls, specific constituency polls. Specifically mentions.
He specifically mentions the Tories are up 15 in Wrexham today. So like
Yeah.
So Wrexham today. So
We
Wrexham
have
is a
that.
Welsh poll. Sure. Yeah. So Wrexham is a Welsh seat. Seat polls in specific are not amazing. We have good pollsters doing it, but we don't have like a good track record of it. I would treat these seat polls the same way that we treat some of those first New York Times upshot Siena polls, which is to say they're good guideposts, but if they came up with something that was completely insane, sort of keep a bit of a spectacle, keep a bit of a skeptical eye. However, the thing about the seat polls is
real quick,
they're not diverging a lot. They're not diverging a lot from what we're seeing, and so that's why I have a little more faith in them, because sort of in aggregate, they're pointing to big conservative swings in these northern.
Evan, real quick, just
areas.
New York Times Siena upshot polls; those were considered pretty good, not directional.
No, they were, but they were.
But just so we can break down, just answer this: what is the difference between a constituency poll and say a congressional poll you see in the U.S.?
We don't have the same track record of them being.
No. Specifically, what's the sample size? What's the mode of data collection? What's the weighting?
So
how many did they do it? Give us the breakdown.
They're generally. I believe the survey polls are phone polls. It's about 500 person sample per constituency.
How big is a constituency? How many?
About 120,000 or so.
Well, it's about 70,000 voters in a constituency.
So 500 sample, N of 500, 70,000 voters. How do they do the weighting or sampling, or what's the normal methodology?
It varies by pollster.
Unfortunately, the British pollsters do have an annoying tendency to want to wait to pass the vote, and sometimes even pass the European Parliament vote, which is just literally meaningless. So some of the weighting and some of the method stuff is definitely questionable and definitely not what I would recommend.
What kind of modes? At that sample size, you probably can't do a lot of online. Are they doing primarily phone?
Some of them actually are doing online. Some are doing online.
For the seat polls, it's mostly phone. I know the Delta poll seat polls of sort of London in the south, they are phone polls. By the fact that Delta poll is an online pollster for their national polls, they are phones. So
well, let me be specific here. When they're doing an online poll in a constituency of 120,000 people, are they not just doing an online poll of a region and then seeing where the sample falls inside the constituency and then waiting there?
No, as far as I could tell,
we can't confirm that fact, but I suspect that's what's actually happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're probably trying to filter out they're probably trying to figure out who lives in certain seats, and they're trying to filter that out, and then they're probably just oversampling a region, and if they get something extra amount from a certain seat, then they'll probably run with that. One more quick thing, though, about Wrexham before we head off. If you look at our model today, we actually have a conservative 4-point lead there. We've had a bigger lead before. We've just had a couple of good whales to crosstabs for Labour, so it's gone down a bit. But again, not a surprise to our model at all. This is basically, if you want a confirmation of what Wrexham is, this is essentially an old coal town in Wales. Basically, think of this as West Virginia, essentially. This is going to be a key seat on election night. And again, leave, 57.3% to leave, 42.7% to remain, right? So Levy seat, Coalfield, working class, Conservatives leading, so that poll makes complete sense and fits perfectly with our model. Again, if we had again, a couple weeks ago we had that, we've just had a couple of good polls for Labour in Wales, and if not, we'd have probably a bigger lead in the Conservatives there as well.